I'm pretty certain that most people nowadays are pretty familiar with Stephen King and his work. He's written many iconic novels from Misery to Carrie, The Green Mile, Pet Sematary, but personally for me I feel like his most popular and well-known work is It. The novel was incredibly popular when it released, and the 1990s film is pretty iconic when you think about stuff that scared you as a child. It certainly scared me. With the release of the two newest films over the past few years, the popularity of It has really just boosted to its peak. There's even a TV show coming out, I think. I mean, it's been like 5 years, who cares? What I'm saying is that the films, the books, the characters, they're all large staples within modern day pop culture, the same that they were in the late 80s and early 90s, and they can be recognised by most people. But after rewatching these films over the past few days, I raised the question, do these suck? I mean, really, despite all the great reception and floods of people that were racing to the cinema, are these films actually well made? Or were they just desperate to make somewhat of a good Stephen King adaptation? King's had many novels adapted into fantastic movies, which I quite regularly revisit and rave about. I love Carrie and Shawshank. I don't like The Shining, sorry. But in recent years, there's really a lack of good ones. Look at Pet Sematary, and that could go for the old one or the new one. They're both pretty miserable films, and I don't mean like scary, I mean they suck. And even The Dark Tower. Oh, you don't remember The Dark Tower? You never heard of it? You never seen it? That makes sense. I saw it in cinemas and I barely remember it. That doesn't matter. Let's travel back to 1986 to the release of the novel to see just how adaptable this book really was. I don't want to spend too much time on the book because I'm actually currently reading it and it's long. That is the big thing to note about this fucking book. It's so long. Some would say too long. We can go through the basics. When the book released, King was already incredibly famous. It was his 22nd release and it did very well with the public. Now obviously it's a Stephen King novel, so there's gonna be controversy, one of which being the length. Over 1,100 pages long. I mean, come on! Even reading as far as I've gotten now, and I'm only like a quarter through this, you could cut so much out of this. Like, ugh. I don't know what he was thinking, but fair enough. I mean, I'm still gonna finish the whole thing, but fuck me. There's also the big thing that many people will be aware of, which is the orgy scene in the novel, which doesn't sit well with a lot of people, understandably. And yeah, I'm not gonna go into huge detail about it. Look it up. It's fucking weird, but I mean, each to their own, and thankfully they never adapted this into either of the films, so, you know, you can't really linger on it a little too much, unless, you know, you're reading the book. There's also the confusing nature of some elements of the novel, this being parts to do with Pennywise's origin and his arrival to Earth, this weird fucking turtle thing, which they also just never use in the film. Trust me, I will get into the turtle very heavily later on. But basically what I want to say is the book is very well received, people like it, and it was a no-brainer that they had to make it into a film. I mean, clowns, man. A lot of people are scared of them, and you can really profit off of that with a film. That takes us to 4 years later, 1990, with the release of the It miniseries. Now, a little explanation towards my connection to it. When the film was coming out, the newest one, I was a big fan of it. I'd never read it, I just knew about it. I'd seen pictures of the Tim Curry clown. And so one day I was gifted the Blu-ray for the miniseries. And I do have some positive things to say about this. Now, obviously the book's long. There's a lot of stuff you have to fit into this. So the miniseries is 3 hours long, which is an issue and it's not. If you're not familiar with the story of It, it follows a group of children that have to go up against a killer clown, who's also an alien that can transform into your biggest fears. The kids defeat it, and then he comes back 27 years later and they have to kill it again when they're adults. Now, the It miniseries, when it follows the children, is actually quite good. The children are very charismatic. It is not clear of its issues, and that is where the hour-and-a-half mark goes, and it goes into the part of the adults. This part of the film is so boring, and nothing happens. And quite frankly, out of that second hour and a half, the highlight is Tim Curry. Tim Curry is the highlight for the whole thing. I would say through the adaptations that the actor that plays the clown is the highlight for me. They work so well. But the issue is that basically to some degree you're telling a completely different story to the novel in the miniseries, because you kind of have to take matters into your own hand. They do a full 180, and at the end of the part he turns into a big spider, which apparently happens in the book. Haven't gotten that far, but I just think, does it hold up for its time somewhat, but also it's just a bit boring really. There's no real mention of the stupid turtle or the ritual at the end of the novel that they used to defeat Pennywise in the miniseries. This might be a good thing because then the miniseries would be even longer, but it does just feel very bare to the bones in comparison to the book. There's a lot of stuff that's left out, and it feels like they did the best with what they could. Obviously, limited resources, you're working in the 90s, you're making a miniseries as well, it's not really a TV show, it's not really a movie. If you have that higher budget to make a film, then yeah, I would expect it to look a little bit better and to be grander on a scale. But clearly they had very limited resources, and you know what? It works to an extent. I'm not done talking about this, because when I get to talking about the 2 new films, then we will discuss the big issue that I think comes with adapting this. So we reached 2017 and 2019, the 2 newest It films by Andy Muschietti. I will discuss what I think works very well with these films. First thing being the fact that the young stuff and the old stuff is split into 2 films. Thank God they finally did this. There's so much you have to cram in from this behemoth of a novel, so it makes sense to me that you would split it up into 2 films. Hell, I would go as far as splitting it into 3, but obviously that's not what Muschietti wanted to do, and it's not what Warner Brothers wanted to do, so you know what, it works to some degree. The cast works incredibly well, especially the young cast. You're gonna notice something. I'm gonna praise the first film a lot more than the second film. I think Finn Wolfhard and the rest of the cast as the young children work incredibly well. You can see that chemistry that they had off screen blend into the camera, because it feels like you're watching a group of lifelong friends in reality. It doesn't feel like anyone's acting. And of course, I'm going to give all my praise to Skarsgård. You can't take your eyes off him when he's on screen. I wouldn't go as far to say he's like terrifying. I mean, when I did originally watch this film when I was 15, I'm sure I was fucking scared, but I'm older. It doesn't hit quite the same. It feels very reminiscent of those old films like Stand By Me and John Hughes films. And, you know, you have to appreciate that, because I think it does work very well and it does blend with what they're trying to do. Again, a lot of the horror in this film, it works well for the most part, except for the cliched, like, big jump scary, loud booms that a lot of modern horror films do now. It doesn't work. It's cheap. It's like having a fucking sign in a live audience that says laugh now during a sitcom. It doesn't feel deserved. But then we have to talk about chapter 2. This film is a fucking mess, but I do enjoy it. It's a guilty pleasure of mine, but I will acknowledge its flaws. First of all, it's 3 hours long. It's justified to an extent. The issue is a big chunk of the middle of the film is so boring. The only real story at this point is going from point A to point B, and all of the losers that came back finding what they need to retrieve to do this ritual to kill the clown, which is in the book. I'll give them that. I don't know if that works very well. Stephen King gets a lot of slack for having bad endings in his novels, and I think that's kind of justified, because the ending of this book fucking sucks, I think. It doesn't translate well on screen. There's too much going on, but there's so much detail that goes into explaining it, and especially in this film, they actually go to that extent of explaining it, and to me, it just doesn't really work. Even the horror aspects of this film feel a little like reusing ideas from the previous, but also not elevating on them at all. They come across much more comedic. There's this one scene with Eddie as an adult where he goes into the cellar of a pharmacy, and it's just like very strange editing and music choices. I don't get it, but I think it is a novel that, much like the films, starts off incredibly well. It follows the children and you feel attached to these kids. You feel like you're growing up with them. Again, it does hold back a little bit when you realize, oh, they're fighting a killer clown from outer space who's actually not a clown, he's a big spider, or he's actually a leper, or he's a lot of things. He's just an entity. You introduce the deadlights, it gets more confusing. I guess there really is an answer to the question, is it unadaptable? And the answer is, of course not. When you think about it, nothing's really unadaptable. When you have a filmmaker or a showrunner making something that they're passionate about, that they've read or looked into, and have a lot of respect for and admire, then of course you can adapt anything. Will it be different from the book? Will there be stuff that's been left out? Obviously. Sometimes you can't fit everything in, and it doesn't translate well to screen, and it is a prime example of that with its fucking length, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that there's films here that clearly show some of that. And I won't doubt Andy Muschietti and his wife Barbara. They clearly very much respect what they do, and they enjoy it, and they have passion for it. So at the end of the day, I think if you're making an adaptation for those reasons, then sure, you can leave out whatever you want. Well, not whatever you want, don't make them completely different. But when you look at other things like The Boys, which is currently on TV just now, and how different that is from the comics, and how awful those comics are in my opinion, sometimes maybe less is better. Thanks for watching. The video's a little bit messy. I just had a lot to get off my chest. I love these films. I really do. They're guilty pleasures, but I can't help it if they're a little bit messy. I mean, if you have any other Stephen King novels or adaptations that you like or hate, or you want to talk about, just comment down below, and that'd be great to hear some feedback, because I don't know, was I making sense, or was I just going crazy this whole fucking time? Thank you for watching. Please check out my other videos. See ya.